Hello, and thanks for continuing with us. As we continue through this lesson on marriage, we'll begin to go through the introduction now. So, Bible-believing Christians are never ever called to defend and harbor the destructive practice of divorce and remarriage adultery, really under any circumstance. And this is no matter how right it may seem to us. We may look at it and say, you know what, those people had a full right to get divorced and remarried, or we can make excuses and say those people were unbelievers in their old life. And so now that they're believers, they can just go marry another believer and do away with their old life and their old children. That's not how it works, okay? A pro-divorce stance, moreover, is a indefensible position to take when we examine it from a biblical and even circumstantial standpoint. And this will be shown in the paper and in the book report that we have included with this course material. God decreed a consummated marriage bond to be a dedication which is inviolable until death do you part, and that is with a period. And amazingly, God's truth is not only for us Christians, but also for the unbelieving world as well. And man, with his arrogance and sin, should never ever try to rewrite or redefine God's order for the family. It is his order, and it has been in place since creation itself. Okay? And so we cannot be pragmatic about biblical divorce exemption clause teachings. They are becoming more and more acceptable in Christian communities, and as a result, this is becoming more and more acceptable in Christian communities. And it results in a devastating breakdown in the nuclear traditional family which God has instituted and which he has decreed. And at the same time, Christian testimony is absolutely diminished at the same time. And we see the normalization of divorce and remarriage as a fundamentally wrong and evil social engineering agenda, no matter what anybody says. So we need, again, to retake this and re-examine it seriously from a biblical perspective, and re-examine exactly what the word says concerning it. And Christians must act in all love and grace to prevent more unnecessary hardship for the family. And if we look at what it means to not divorce, even when a spouse has been offended, we see it as an awesome act of peace. And this is the key to the peace and joy Christ has called us to. And so one other thing I've found with this study is that pastors or those who are in leadership positions, that could be elders or what have you, need to really listen to those who are closest to the problem. Some of them, in fact, most of them, have not gone through a remarriage or an adultery situation themselves, and so are rather insulated from the realities and the calamity of it. But they need to hear from people who have gone through it or who are in the middle of it, and can tell them firsthand about how difficult of a position it is to be in. They may look at the problem from a distance and say, that looks okay to go do that, but they have no idea what they're getting the families into, because they simply don't see that. And moreover, we also need to understand that the whole narrative and this whole reality of rampant divorce and adultery everywhere you really look now is an abnormality. It's not normal, okay? And if we continue to look at this as some acceptable problem that we have in our church houses or in our world, we'll see a tragedy result from this. Okay, these divorce rates were once relatively unheard of in years like the 1940s and 50s, And now we can see they are common and widespread. And just because something happens frequently, like divorce or remarriage, never ever makes it normal or right. And what we see with social problems or with engineering is that if there is an error that repeats itself enough times, suddenly it becomes not an error at all, or just a normal part of civilization. And we don't want to see that happen. Secondly, and this must be said, is that divorce and remarriage is a sensitive and highly emotional issue, and we can all accept that. People that have dreamed of having a great marriage and a family, their dreams have been crushed by somebody that didn't hold up their end, somebody that violated them by cheating, somebody that lied to them. And it's a heartbreaking situation. And few things are more painful than the results of a dirty, ugly, and bitter divorce. And it results in a sore pain, divorce does, where even death, as tragic as that is, has been described as a clean pain. And then, divorce is bad enough. And then just when a spouse that has been devastated by that thinks it can't get any worse, all of a sudden they get word or hear and observe that their partner is going to get into a new adulterated relationship. And then it just makes the pain that much more difficult. And so we'll talk about that. What does that mean? When adultery begins to ensue in these troubled relationships. And we'll see that second marriages are more likely to end in divorce as well. Okay. And the quote here from Alicia Clark, who is a psychologist, said, "Whether it's the unexpected complications of blending families or the disappointment that a new marriage still falls short of one's hope for marital bliss, expectations about marriage and family will be challenged by a second marriage. And complicating this, many second marriages aspire to avoid the very irreconcilable problems they left from a previous marriage, only to find them," she says, "in different forms in their new marriage. Expectations are unreasonably high, quite often, and bounds that can crumble under this burdensome weight." End of quote. So the bottom line is it doesn't work. There's only one way marriage can work. And what we're going to try to do is describe that very clearly in these following lessons, in these presentations, and certainly in the book. There's one great way you can understand how to divorce-proof your marriage. And that is to see and understand very clearly that divorce is not an option, and neither is getting into remarriage adultery. And if you can see that, the human nature will be more inclined to focus on ways they can make their marriage work and be happy in that, okay? And so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about children who end up confused, angry, and resentful as well. We'll talk about helpers and their roles in these marital situations and these devastation that is associated with separation and divorce. And we'll understand that, as Dr. Chuck Swindoll says, good marriages don't just happen. They take work, and lots of it. After the marriage ceremony, roll up your sleeves. And so all marriages go through patches of difficult times and times of challenge, but we're never called to give up. Two sinners are living together in close proximity, problems are bound to happen. But we're never called to give up. And we're never ever to place hope on divorce, remarriage, or finding some imaginary perfect match out there somewhere. Okay?